Hello! In this video, we'll show you how you can use Python tools for Visual Studio with Django to develop a simple voting application. We will first run it locally using a SQLite 3 database. We'll make use of static files such as style sheets and images. We'll show Django template debugging capabilities available in Python tools for Visual Studio. We'll switch from the local SQLite 3 database to a SQL Server database running on Windows Azure. We'll look at the Django Shell interactive window, and finally we'll publish our web application to a Windows Azure website and a Windows Azure cloud service. Here I'm in Visual Studio 2012 with Python tools for Visual Studio installed. First I'm going to create a new project of type Django application, call it tutorial. Next, we're going to create a virtual environment into which we're going to install our dependent packages. So right-click here on Python environment, add virtual environment. We'll just keep the default name, and here we can pick the interpreter. Make sure it's Python 2.7. That's what we need for running on Windows Azure. Click Create. So the virtual environment has been created. I can right-click on it and say Add Install Python Package. We're going to install Django. And that's going to take a while, so we're going to skip ahead. And now Django has been installed in our virtual environment. If I expand the node here, we can see it listed. Now we'll add a polls application to our project. Right-click on a project node, say Add Django App Polls. We'll go to the settings file, add the new polls app here, uncomment this line. This is going to give us the nice admin interface we get for free from Django. We'll update the main URLs file and we'll make it delegate to a URLs file we'll create in polls. We'll define our models. Very simple, 2 classes, 1 poll has multiple choices. Define the URLs we'll support in polls. The root will be the index page. We're going to have a detail page, a results page, and a voting, which is the post which will happen when the user clicks submit. And this is the implementation of that submit. So it will pick up the poll from the database and update the vote count on it. And here we'll define how we want our admin pages to look. And now we'll create our template pages. When we created the Django app, it gave us an index by default. We're going to move that down 1 subdirectory. And that's just so that we can refer to the index.html with polls/index. And this way, if we ever add more applications to our project, Django will be able to tell which one we want to render. So the template will just display a link for each poll in the database. The detail page where the user can vote. And the results page. Now we're almost ready to run the application. We just need to set up the database first. So this is going to give us the path to the project folder, which is where we're going to want our database file to live. And we'll replace this section here. And that's going to tell it to use SQLite 3 as the database engine and to create the file under our project folder. Now let's go here on the project node and say Django syncdb. It's going to bring up a Django management console, and it tells us that it's creating all these tables. Some of them are for the Django admin tables, and some of them are for the model that we defined. Yes, I want to create a super user. And this password will let us into the Django admin interface. Let's run the application. We'll go debug, start without debugging. It says that there's no polls available, and that's because we haven't created any yet. Let's go to the Django admin interface. And here I can click on add. Do you like Django? No. Now we can go back to the index. We got our first poll. And I can try to vote without selecting an option. See, that works. Yes. No. Yes. Let's look at how we can change our site to use style sheets, bitmaps, or JavaScript files, any kind of static files. We'll update the static root definition in our settings file. This is going to collect all the static files to the static directory right under your project root. So whenever you call manage.py, collect static, which is actually done automatically for you when you're going to get to publishing to Azure. Now here under polls, I'm going to create a static directory, and that's where the static file sources will be. Another one for images. I'm going to create a style sheet here. We don't have a template for that, so let's use text file. Dark blue text on a background image. I select my background image and add it to my project. And now let's update each page so that they refer to that style sheet. Let's just change the header here. And now let's run this site again. We can see our background picture and the text is blue. Python Tools for Visual Studio has debugging support for Django templates. Let's have a quick look. Here I have the page that renders the poll. We'll put a breakpoint here and start debugging. Let's bring up the poll. It breaks here, and we can inspect that object, that poll object, when the question is, do you like Django? And you can step in the code here. We should have a choice. First choice is yes. Second choice is no. I'm going to continue. Yes, I like Django. So our website is working well locally. Let's take the next step into getting our website running on Windows Azure. So that would be switching from using the SQLite 3 database to using a SQL Server database on Windows Azure. So I'm at windows.azure.com. I'm going to sign in and we're going to see how to do that. So I'm logged in, looking at the SQL databases for my subscription. We're going to say new SQL database, quick create, name it tutorial, select my subscription. We're going to say create a new server. Azure create. Now it's created. First thing I'm going to do is let the server know about my IP address. Otherwise, it's going to reject any connection from my computer. And by default, it's going to allow all connections from Windows Azure, so when we get to publishing it, there won't be any problems. So that should do it, but in case there's any problems later, we can always come back and edit the range of IP addresses that are allowed. I'll hit save. Now I'm back in Visual Studio and I'm going to add a couple of packages which will allow us to connect to SQL database from Django. The first one is PyODBC, and we have to tell PTVS to use easy install for that one. I got an elevation prompt, I accepted, and that was installed successfully. Next package is Django PyODBC Azure, and that one we can install with pip. That was installed successfully. Now we're going to change the settings so that we switch from SQLite 3 to Azure, and now I need to specify the database name, and that's tutorial. My password, tutorial 123. Username Azure, and I need to get the server name, which I'm copy pasting from the Azure UI. Here we go. So now I can say Django sync DB, connected successfully. We'll create our super user. Now I'm just making the password for the Django admin the same as the SQL Server database password, just for convenience. It doesn't have to be the same. And now it's done. We got our database all set up. We're just going to need to add some polls next. When we initially created the SQLite 3 database, we used the Django admin interface to add a poll. There's an alternative here. We're going to use the Django shell. Open Django shell on your project. And here we can type code to talk to our database using our models. Do some import. And we'll add a new poll. We'll ask a different question this time. Save that poll. Create a few choices. And we can query all the objects. We just have one. Look at the ID of the last poll, which is 1. Look at the choices for that poll. Let's get an object by primary key. So it's a nice way to use our models and learn the API, because the IntelliSense is really great in the interactive window like this. So let's start our website. So that's the question we just added in our SQL database running on Azure. We'll say website. And the vote is in. So you can notice it's a little bit slower here because the database is not local. And the next step is going to be to publish our website to Windows Azure. And now I'm back in the Windows Azure portal, and I'm going to create the website that we're going to publish to. Compute website, quick create. We'll say website tutorial. Publish in East US because that's where our database server is. And create website. And now it's created. Back in Visual Studio, I'll go to my project node, say publish. We're going to import a profile from an Azure website. Website tutorial. Next, finish. You can see the output window here. It copied all the static files, so all the ones that the Django admin interface is using, those are all JavaScript files. and also the style sheet and the background image that we're using from our project. So that's going to take a little while because Django has about 2,500 files, and our virtual environment is getting published. We'll skip ahead when it's done. So the publishing to Windows Azure website has completed. It gives us the URL here. If I click on that, it will take me to my website running on Azure, as we can see in the URL here. I'm going to vote for website, and that's 2 votes. Vote again, website, 3 votes. So our Django application is now running on Windows Azure website. Now let's publish to a Windows Azure Cloud Service. We'll right-click on the project node, add Windows Azure Cloud Service project, and if you don't see that command, it's probably because you don't have the Azure tools installed for your version of Visual Studio. Select that. That creates a second project, and on that project I will select Publish. I will choose my subscription. We'll tell it to create a new cloud service. The location is loading right now. East US, because that's where our database server is located. If we wanted to, we could enable remote desktop so we could connect to that machine, but we're not going to do that now. Just hit Publish. And you can see it's going through the step of collecting the static files, but since that's already been done before and nothing changed, it didn't copy any files. And now it's going to package up our whole project and virtual environment and send that to the cloud service. That's going to take a few minutes, so we're going to jump ahead. Deployment has completed to our cloud service, so we'll just click on the URL here. And it opened the page at the URL for our cloud service. We'll vote for cloud service. And it worked. In this video, I've shown you how to create a simple Django app, edit, debug, and deploy it to the cloud. You can deploy to your own cloud manually or use the integrated support in VS to deploy to Azure. For more information about Azure websites and cloud services, please see the Python docs on windowsazure.com. Thanks for watching.